Hi, this is Fuad Abasov, a broker with Right at Home Realty, and this is your monthly real estate statistics.
The real estate landscape in Toronto, as reported by the Toronto Real Estate Board, paints a picture of complexity and uncertainty. Despite a better supplied market compared to the previous year, home sales in March of 2024 were lower, partly due to factors like a statutory holiday and March break. However, competition among buyers has still led to a moderate increase in the average home prices compared to last year. One significant challenge facing potential home buyers is the disparity between falling home prices since the pandemic peak and significantly higher mortgage costs due to elevated interest rates. This situation has made carrying a home considerably more expensive, especially for variable rate holders, potentially causing some buyers to step back from the market while others adjust to the new reality. The decision by the Bank of Canada to hold rates has prompted some buyers to wait for potential rate cuts before entering the market, while others are taking advantage of slightly lower prices and increased inventory. However, the majority of buyers are feeling increasingly stretched in their journey towards home ownership, with affordability becoming a significant concern. Moreover, the struggles extend beyond buyers, as construction companies and developers facing financial difficulties have led to uncertainty and challenges in the market, potentially impacting supply and affordability. Reflecting on the housing market of 2022, which was more affordable despite higher prices, underscores the current challenges in affordability. Even with potential rate cuts, affordability may worsen as home prices continue to rise, further burdening carrying costs.
Now, let's take a closer look at detached home sales in Toronto and surrounding areas.
In Toronto, average home price of detached home in March was $1.71 million, 0.42 increase compared to March of last year. The amount of sold properties went up by 0.15%. The amount of new listings increased only by 2%. On average, it takes 16 days for a detached home to be sold in Toronto today. An average selling price of detached home in Vaughan in March was $1.77 million, 4% decrease compared to March of last year. The amount of sold properties went up by 4.7%. The amount of new listings increased by 33%. It takes on average 16 days for a detached home to be sold in Vaughan today. Richmond Hill, average selling price of detached home in March was $1.85 million, 5.4% decrease compared to March of last year. The amount of sold properties also went down by 11%. The amount of new listings, however, increased by almost 23%. On average, it takes 17 days for a detached home to be sold in Richmond Hill today. In Mississauga, average selling price of detached home in March was $1.58 million, 1% increase compared to March of last year. The amount of sold properties went up by 3%. The amount of new listings increased by 14%. On average, it takes 18 days for a detached home to be sold in Mississauga today. In Markham, an average selling price of detached home in March was $1.81 million. No change compared to March of last year. Prices remained the same. The amount of sold properties went down by 3%. The amount of new listings increased by 11%. On average, it takes less than 2 weeks for a detached home to be sold in Markham today. In Newmarket, an average selling price of detached home in March was $1.34 million, almost 2% increase compared to March of last year. The amount of sold properties decreased by 12%. The amount of new listings, however, increased by 15%. On average, it takes 18 days for a detached home to be sold in Newmarket today. In Aurora, an average selling price of detached home in March was $1.7 million, 3% increase compared to March of last year. The amount of sold properties went down by 33%. The amount of new listings increased only by 4%. On average, it takes 15 days for a detached home to be sold in Aurora today. An average selling price of detached home in Innisfil in March was $1 million, a 10% increase compared to March of last year. The amount of sold properties went down by 17%. The amount of new listings also decreased by 13%. On average, it takes 29 days for a detached home to be sold in Innisfil today. average selling price of a detached home in King City in March was $2.39 million, 5% decrease compared to prices of last March. The amount of sold properties increased by 175%. The amount of new listings also increased by 34%. On average, it takes 39 days for a detached home to be sold in King City today. In Bradford, average selling price of detached home was $1.11 million, 6% decrease compared to prices of last March. The amount of sold properties went down by 20%. The amount of new listings, however, went up by 28%. On average, it takes 16 days for a detached home to be sold in Bradford today. In Milton, average selling price of detached home in March was $1.37 million, 2.5% decrease compared to March of last year. The amount of sold properties went down by 10%. The amount of new listings increased by 21%. On average, it takes 2 weeks for a detached home to be sold in Milton today. In Stoufville, average selling price in March was $1.7 million, 12% increase compared to March of last year. The amount of sold properties was down by 7%, however, amount of new listings increased by 30%. On average, it takes 23 days for a detached home to be sold in Stoufville today. In Barrie, average selling price of detached home in March was $866,000, 6% increase in prices compared to March of last year. The amount of sold properties went down by 41%. The amount of new listings also went down by 40%. It takes on average 20 days for a detached home to be sold in Barrie today. In Oakville, average selling price of detached home in March was $2 million, 3% decrease compared to prices of last year. The amount of sold properties went down by 10%. The amount of new listings increased by 12%. On average, it takes 17 days for a detached home to be sold in Oakville today. The market's volatility over the years, marked by fluctuating interest rates and government policies, has left many stakeholders feeling apprehensive and uncertain. While there are signs of an upward trend in the current market, characterized by increased sales and new listings, buyer confidence remains tempered by the uncertainty surrounding interest rates and affordability.
If you'd like to receive your own personalized sales report about home sales in your neighborhood, please email me at sold@fuadhomes.com or call me at 647-801-3401. Thanks for watching and see you next month.